Chapter 19, Problem 3. Write the chemical formula for the following. Dichloro, bis, ethylene diamine, chromium 3, sulfate. That's definitely a mouthful. But the first thing I want to point out is there's a space between those two words. So the first word is the cation. The second word is the anion. Now notice that the first word contains a transition metal. Plus, it's got all these other things attached to it. So these other things are the ligands and this is, like we said, the transition metal. So we call this a complex cation. So when you write the formula for a complex cation, you always start with the transition metal. So I'm going to start with Cr. And then you add the ligands. So dichloro means there's 2 chlorines. Bis ethylene diamine. So bis also means 2. In problem number 2, we said that there was some ligands called chelating ligands. So whenever you have a chelating ligand, instead of saying di, you say bis. Now, ethylene diamine can be abbreviated EN, or if you want, you could write out the whole formula. So you could see why there's definitely an advantage to writing EN because that is really long. You do want to know it both ways though. Okay, so that's it for our complex cation in terms of we've got the transition metal and we've got the ligands, but now let's figure out what the charge is. So chromium 3 tells us this is +3. And chloride ions, those are -1 each. So this whole ion, if we add that up, is +1. Now, sulfate, this is one of our polyatomic ions from the past. That's SO4 2-. So remember when we were way back in Chem 1A, we said we have to, when we put these together, we have to balance out the charge. So since the cation is +1 and the anion is -2, we're going to need to have 2 cations for every 1 anion. Okay, part B, potassium tetrabromo dicyano platinate 2. So potassium is the cation, and then everything else is the anion. So notice this time that the transition metal with the ligands is part of the anion. So we would call that a complex anion. So the cation, potassium, is +1. We'll come back to that. Tetrabromo dicyano platinate 2. So our transition metal is platinum. And let's keep track of the charges. So that's +2. Tetrabromo. So we have 4 bromines. Those are -1 each. And then dicyano. Those are also -1 each. So if we add that up, that's a total of -4. So to balance that out, we're going to need 4 potassiums for every one complex ion. Now, if you haven't noticed already, complex ions, we put a bracket around it so that we can keep it separate from the other ion.